Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Evelyn here, and welcome to our my live stream. And I said I wanted to talk a bit about gluten. I get so many questions about gluten. People say, "Oh, well, should I go gluten-free or should I not?" So some people say like nobody should be eating gluten and it's really bad for us, and it's the cause of all kinds of problems. And other people say, gluten-free is just a marketing thing. It's it's a fad. It's a fad diet. It will go away again. And that's my. I wanted to give you my take on it. Hi, Carolina. Good to see you here. So what is gluten, or what are gluten? Gluten is a sort of a mixture of different proteins, and they're part of grains, of certain grains, so mainly as wheat and spelt, and all the older grains as well have gluten, but also barley and rye, and oats can have some gluten as well. Hi, Margaret. Good to see you here. So oats can have gluten as well, and in the oats it's often about contamination. So oats in themselves don't have the same gluten as in wheat, but they're often grown in the same fields and processed in the same factories. And so when they test oats, they can see the oats have quite a lot of gluten in them just because of that. So and what does gluten do? So the protein actually, especially when you stretch it or when it gets wet, it gets more elastic. And that's actually how it works in bread. And that's why bread made with like wheat it can get like nice and fluffy, and instead of being a sort of a brick. So that's a great thing about gluten. The other thing is that it can bind other ingredients together and make it a bit thicker. When you make a soup and you add some flour, it will thicken up and get more thicker, thicker soup, which can be nice for soups and sauces, but also for all kinds of condiments. And that is why we find so many products on the supermarket shelves that have gluten in them, where you wouldn't expect it. Like you think, like tomato ketchup is just tomatoes and some stuff, but there's also gluten in there, and in many other products as well. So what is the problem with what can be the problem with gluten? Well, it is because it's a mixture of protein, and it's a long molecule. It's hard for us to break it down completely. So what happens then, if it comes into our small intestine, it's not broken down completely. So instead of that, it's the smallest particles that can go into our bloodstream via the the small intestine. It's larger particles, and they can't get in, and they're sort of sitting there and then causing a little bit of inflammation. And what I don't know if you have seen my leaky gut video. It's somewhere down. It was mine of last week, so you can find it somewhere in this group, where I explained that there's actually just a very thin cell layer, just one cell layer thick, between what's in the tube of our gut and what comes into our bloodstream, basically. And those cells that are standing next to each other and being very clear about what can go in and what cannot go in. Now, when there's the gluten are there, these cells can be affected by an inflammation a bit, and so they change form a bit. So they get a bit, they change form, and then the gaps between them get a bit bigger, and then it can let through larger particles than the particles that the body knows. So larger bits of protein and larger bits of any other food. And then the immune system is like, hey, hang on, what's this? I don't know this. That's foreign. And the main task for the immune system is to actually make sure that any foreign thing that comes into our body, that it fights that, it makes sure it goes away. So then it attacks whatever comes through those gaps in those cells. And then your immune system is actually two things can happen. Either it is quite busy with just fighting everything that's coming through those gaps, and it can't pay so much attention to other bits of inflammation going on in your body, like maybe in your joints, so it can give you a little bit of joint pain, or maybe in your skin, it can give you some skin issues, and there's more examples of this. And if that goes on for quite some time and the immune system has to fight this stuff all the time, what actually can happen is that the immune system gets a bit overwhelmed and confused and starts attacking your own tissue. And that's where you have the start of an autoimmune disease. And we see so many autoimmune diseases at the moment. I think they say there's like 140 diseases where they now recognize, yes, this has an autoimmune mechanism behind it. So yeah, really important to know that. So then a question I get very often is like, yes, but our grandparents ate bread all the time, and why didn't they have a problem with it? So there's a few answers to that. The one is, I think that even though our grandparents ate a lot of bread, we are eating more gluten than they did, because for us it's not just bread, it's also biscuits and energy bars and pasta, and it's in all our ketchup and our ready food, and it's everywhere. So we're having little bits of it all the time. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the wheat, as we used to know it, has changed, because the people have been developing a kind of wheat that actually has more gluten, because we all like that fluffy bread and that being good as a thickener. So there's more gluten in the wheat now than there was before. So that's another one. And the third answer to the question of why our ancestors weren't so bothered by the gluten as we are is what I call my bucket theory. So just imagine a bucket, and the bucket is the capacity of your body to put up with all the kinds of things that happen to it and that are not so healthy. So let's say in your bucket is maybe you're not sleeping so well, you might be sitting a lot, there are some toxins in the air, you have some food sensitivities, you have some stress, and then maybe you're genetically have some problems with your genes because of your parents had some issues, and you can have them as well. And so that builds up and up and up. And then when you eat every day something that is actually causing a problem for your body, even though it's small, it adds up and it adds up. And at some point that bucket overflows. And then when that happens, that means your body can't deal with it. It can't resolve it anymore. And you start getting symptoms. And I think nowadays our buckets are fuller because of our modern lifestyle than they were for our ancestors. So that's why I think more of us now have a problem with gluten than our grandparents did. So I think we all know, or most people know, that if you have celiac disease, you need to be strictly gluten-free. And some people say, well, if you don't have celiac disease, gluten are not bothering you, so you're fine. But there's actually also something that is called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So you don't have celiac disease, but you are still sensitive to gluten, and you notice it when you eat them, or you might not even notice them. Hi, Sally, good to see you here. So non-celiac gluten sensitivity can be seen in two ways. So one is that you eat something with gluten and you quite quickly have a reaction, like it could be bloating or some pain or maybe a bit of urgency to go to the toilet. And I would call that more like a digestive reaction. So your digestive system reacts to the gluten, or the bacteria in your digestive system react to it. And so you can feel it. And it can be, if you pay a little bit of attention, it can become clear more easily that when you eat that, you get a reaction, because there's not so much time in between. But there's also so this was the digestive reaction, but there's also an immune reaction, and that reaction takes a bit more time. And the symptoms from that can maybe show up the next day or even 2 days later. And then it's much harder to make the connection between the gluten and the symptoms. And the symptoms can be a bit similar, but also can be a bit different. Like if you could give some joint pain or headaches or migraines or some brain fog, like you can't think straight anymore. And it's harder to make the connection between the two, between the eating the gluten and the symptom, because of the delay. And then if you're eating gluten all day long, a little bit here and a little bit there, then it's even harder to make the connection, because it's just happening all the time, and it can be very unclear and confusing what's happening. So so how do you know? How do you know if you have this sensitivity to gluten? So a lot of people think, well, it's easy. We just do food sensitivity testing, and that can give you an answer, and it can come up. But the problem I see is or have seen with clients, that sometimes it doesn't come up in their food sensitivity test, but they still get symptoms and they still feel better if they don't eat it. So, and then the test is also, it's like 100 pounds here. So I think, why not give yourself like 4 weeks to totally eliminate it? So make sure you go fully gluten-free, which means, so with gluten, and trying this out, it's not like, if you have less, you have less symptoms. It's more like an all or nothing situation. I will say, like, let's say you're sitting on 3 push pins, and that hurts, right? So even if you take 2 push pins away, you're still sitting on one and it still hurts. Well, that's sort of the situation with gluten as well. If you want to eliminate it, go full in and do it 100% for 3-4 weeks and see how you do. And if you feel better and you see your symptoms changing, then and then it would be a good idea to not have it again. Sometimes people don't notice so much change in their symptoms, and then they decide to reintroduce it again, and maybe it doesn't make a difference. So they're fine then. But if they then reintroduce, it can be that their symptoms flare up, and then they have an answer as well. So yeah, it might be a good idea to try that out for yourself if you want to find out if you are sensitive to gluten. Now, if you want to try it out, be careful in the supermarket, because you might have seen, like, first there was maybe 1 shelf for gluten-free, but nowadays it's like getting to being half an aisle. And so there's a lot of foods there, and gluten-free does not equal healthy. Sometimes they put all kinds of other stuff in gluten-free foods that are not so healthy. And so you want to be careful there. I have a little a link to something on my website that can help you a bit with what to choose in the supermarket, and I will post that later here in the comments. What was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh yeah, just try it out. If you have any questions, maybe ask them now or put them in the comments. I'm happy to chat and explain more if you want. And you can also send me a personal message if you feel like you don't want to share your question with everybody. So that's also a possibility. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Please post in the comments and click on the link to my website where there's a bit more information. I will post that as soon as the recording is up. Okay, thank you and bye.